The love that God has for you is not of this world. The business in heaven is preoccupied by your redemption. Othinta wena uphandle uThixo maye kuloyo yakubingelela egameni lozayo uJesu Kristu. The message is forwarded from the book of Luke chapter 22. A few verses will be considered, starting off with verse 31 as it reads, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. Ngizocela underline permission no sift you like wheat. The context of this chapter is characterized by the final preparations for the assassination of Jesus Christ. The drama is at the table of the Holy Communion with Judas as a culprit. Before I attempt to establish justice on the case of verse 31, I'd like to briefly entertain the ignorance of the disciples on the issue of Judas Iscariot as reflected in verses 21 to 23. Behold, the hand of the one betraying me is with mine on the table. For indeed the Son of Man is going as it has been determined, but woe to that man by whom he is betrayed. And they began to discuss among themselves, underline discuss, and they began to discuss among themselves which one of them might be who was going to do this thing. In verse 21, Jesus is giving his disciples a signal that points to Judas as the betrayer. But still, they ask themselves as to who will betray him. Jesus is saying the one who will betray him is the one whose hand is with his hand on the table. This presupposes that the hand of Judas at that moment was in juxtaposition with the hand of Jesus. But still, that was not enough to the consciousness of the other disciples to realize that Jesus is singling out Judas Iscariot as the betrayer. There are two theological principles effective here. Number one, when Jesus released the revelation about his betrayer, the disciples began to discuss among themselves as to who is Jesus referring to. In other words, they tackled the matter with a collective discussion. I concur to this tendency because the disciples showed the spirit of dealing with issues collectively. Solomon says, in the multitude of counselors, there's wisdom. Individualism never worked even in a perfect world. When Adam was preoccupied by his duties in a world without sin, God saw it not fit for a man to be alone. Albertine itself would have not survived the period of 7 years as well as the inconveniences that come along with COVID-19 had we not moved as a collective. One of the advantages of collectiveness is its inevitable propensity to expose the one who is not for the idea. We are collective, or rather when we are collective, it will not take too long until a culprit reveals himself. When Jesus taught us how to pray, he said, when you pray, say our Father. The term our is indicative of collectiveness. This presupposes that the answer of God to you is characterized and justified by collectiveness. In other words, everything that God blesses you is not for you alone. You can never benefit from the Father who is our Father and expect to confine the benefits of your blessings to yourself. That is why one of the greatest principles in the kingdom of God is to give, for God so loved the world that he gave. So this is what the Lord is saying. Be ye collective and united. Principle number 2. Jesus gave a clear signal to refer to Judas as a betrayer, but still the disciples did not get the hint. This presupposes that the disciples never imagined nor viewed anyone among themselves as a coward. Jesus is the reason to this ignorance. His grace for them was so equally accommodative in that no one realized that someone among them is not one of them. You know, the grace of God is so accommodative to an extent that those who killed Jesus, who is life, went back home alive. Can you imagine? You are killing life, which is the source of life, but you still go back home alive. Such an accommodative grace. The grace of God is so accommodative to an extent that Paul, who orchestrated the assassination of Stephen, will be sitting at the same table with him in heaven. You know, I still doubt as to whether the unfallen beings will ever understand the noise and shout of praise and worship that will be brought by us who have experienced this grace in this world. In verse 31, Jesus says that Satan has requested a permission to deal with Peter. Jesus is saying that whatever is going to happen to Peter, caused by the devil, has been allowed by God. I hope you are getting this. This means that the devil needed a permit to access Peter's life. To have a permit means you are operating under the regulations of the one who permitted you. Your operations are regulated. That's what it means to have a permit. It also means that your operations have been assessed and found to have no harm concerning the aims and objectives of the desired outcome. In other words, Jesus was saying to Peter, the permitted attempt of the devil against him does not threaten the plans that God have for him. This therefore means that we have nothing to fear because the devil's operations against us are under God's control. It was in such a context that Paul said, what is it that can separate us from the love of God? Ngoba konke okwenzakalayo finds us ready, or whatever that happens against us, usher us to a better plan. Jesus says, the devil has been permitted to seek Peter like wheat. There are theological principles encapsulated just right there. We will have to borrow from the archives of agricultural theology. Sifting wheat means that you are separating wheat from the chaff. So sifting wheat means that you are putting wheat to a better grade. Now, Jesus says that the devil has been given a tender to sift Peter like wheat. In other words, the devil's operations against Peter have been permitted for the purposes of removing trash from Peter's faith. The devil who thrives in trash is used to remove trash from Peter. Jesus is trying to show us here that the devil is so foolish that in his operation he finds himself fulfilling a better purpose in our lives. Jesus is simply trying to tell us that in life, as long as you live for Jesus, you must know that everything happening to you is part of a better plan. What I can say to you, hold on, Mntana Sekhaya. May God bless you.